Understanding the Bible Part 2. Welcome, I'm Paweł Stawarczyk. Today we would like to speak about Mesopotamia. I apologize, but this video is still work in progress. My English is unedited, so it will be more polished than polished. So just please keep that in mind and forgive me. In the last presentation, we clarified what the Fertile Crescent is. If you'd like, you can review that information in the former presentation. Mesopotamia forms part of the Fertile Crescent. Its name comes from Old Greek and it means between rivers. Primarily two major rivers, one of them the Euphrates, and the other one the Tigris. In modern political terms, Mesopotamia would be in what is today Iran, Iraq, Syria, and Turkey. 5,000 years before Jesus, which is 7,000 years from today, already in Mesopotamia, we are looking at civilizations that have cities, that have agriculture, architecture, literature, writing, and are well advanced. The oldest known civilization is Sumer. Some 1,000 years later, Sumer gives way to Akkad. The civilizations of Sumer and Akkad became home for many astounding technological achievements that we enjoy until today. We will speak about them later. Since nothing lasts forever, even such great civilizations eventually collapsed. This collapse led to a lot of upheaval and population movements. We will see that when we read the history of Abraham and his descendants. In the West, Egypt was undergoing a prolonged time of weakness of a few hundred years. In the East, the civilizations collapsed in Mesopotamia, also for a few hundred years. So this created a power vacuum in Canaan. And that's why the 12 tribes could conquer it, and later on King David could build his kingdom. Building on the ruins of former empires and improving their achievements, a new empire arose, Babylonia. We will hear a lot about Babylonia in the Old Testament as well as in the New Testament. After a few hundred years of thriving and flourishing, Babylonia collapses. Assyria conquers it, and now it is the Assyrian Empire that presents an interesting background for the events in the Bible. This is the extent of the Babylonian Empire at its peak. In the West, as we see, it conquered even Egypt. Israel is just a puny tiny land, sandwiched between bigger, more prosperous countries. Conquering Israel is just a necessity to have a land bridge to more prosperous Egypt or more prosperous Syria accordingly. This is the extent of the Assyrian Empire at its peak. As we see, it was just as big, just as prosperous, just as powerful, just as aggressive, just as predatory as its predecessor. Judah is all that is left from Israel after years of wars and oppression and planned assimilation within the Babylonian and Assyrian empires. A new empire arises, Persia. It manages to conquer what is left from the Assyrian Empire. Persia presents later an interesting background for a number of biblical events as well. Yet again, the tiny Jewish nation is a toy tossed around by waves of historical storms. Persia collapses under Alexander the Great from Macedonia. A new language becomes official, Greek. For a few hundred years, the followers of Alexander rule over those areas. As the legacy of Alexander the Great collapses, new rulers move in. From the west, the Roman Empire, and from the east, a new Persian Empire. From now on, the history of Mesopotamia and Israel go two separate ways. Aramaic was the official language of the Mesopotamian empires. It was so pervasive that Jewish people started using it even among themselves. Jesus spoke Aramaic as his native language. Alexander the Great introduced Greek as the official language, and Romans kept it up. Later on, in other presentations, we will see the importance of Aramaic and Greek as languages in the Bible. A number of important things that we enjoy today go back to Mesopotamia. The Sumerians started the cultivation of wheat and barley. They domesticated cattle and sheep as we know them today. As countless generations improved upon these achievements, today we can wear funny hats and have a burger on a bun with beer. Some insights as to how managed groups go back thousands of years to the Mesopotamian civilizations. Mesopotamia is the home of the cuneiform. If you're not sure how to pronounce cuneiform, just think of a unicorn, which kind of sounds similar. What's different is that cuneiform is a writing system and unicorns are not. What's similar is that cuneiform and unicorns are equally rare today, but what's different is that cuneiform gets chiseled and unicorns not so much. Is it now easier to remember how to pronounce cuneiform? Okay, so now we're ready to attack the issue of cuneiform. A whole new world of possibilities open up if the whole empire can read and write. With the spread of literacy, people can send each other such cute notes like the one to the left. To the right, children go to school. They're introduced into the world of literature, mathematics, engineering, and so on. This is an intelligence test for you. You have 5 seconds to learn the alphabet of the cuneiform. Okay, time's up. Now read this text and tell us what it is about. That was probably too easy, so let's have 2 texts. Let's take a look at them and compare. What are they about? I will give you a few hints. One text is a genealogy of King Cyrus the Great, the Persian king, emperor, and a long story of his achievements and battles. and the other text is a short note about where the beer is located that was part of payment for servants. So which text is which? You guessed it! The short one is the note about the beer, and the other one is the story of the King Cyrus. Okay, now let's learn the cuneiform numbers. You have 5 seconds. Sorry about the English description. You probably would have guessed that it is 2 something squared and resulting in something else. You would have guessed anyway, right? This is probably a note of someone doing their taxes. Now look, the cuneiform looks much easier than the one we use today. Isn't it amazing? You know what's even more amazing? That with all this complicated mathematics, they came up as their fastest truck with this. Mesopotamians used the sexagesimal system. It sounds like an embarrassing condition that you can catch, but in fact it's a very innocent counting system with the number 60 as its base. If you count the spaces on your 4 fingers, you come up with the number 12. And then if you count your fingers, you come up with the number 60. Using their complicated mathematics and their sexagesimal system, Mesopotamians developed a way of measuring time. Our modern clock goes back to Mesopotamians. Wait a minute, that's not the clock I wanted to show. Wait a minute, that's a wrong clock too. Oh, who cares? Do I really have to show you a picture of a modern clock? Come on. These are other examples of a Mesopotamian legacy. Mesopotamians built huge temples that doubled as astronomical observatories. The story of the Tower of Babel refers to those temples. Astronomy and astrology go back to these civilizations. Astronomers were not just some wide-eyed guys discussing if Pluto is a planet. They were engineers, scientists, and powerful advisors in the courts of kings. Until today, we use their inventions, their discoveries, and their philosophy, including the constellations. Everything you learned today about Mesopotamia will help you a little to understand God speaking to you through the Bible. There is one danger in all that you start showing off what you know about Mesopotamia. Don't. What really matters when we open the Bible is that we learn how to listen to God, that we understand His message. What's even more recommended is to listen to God in a community. So, listening to God in a community is far more important than knowing a lot about Mesopotamia. In the next part of understanding the Bible, we will see that understanding the Mesopotamian worldview helps us understand the Bible. And now, are you ready for the last challenge? So, ready, set, go! Read carefully both texts and tell us what they are about. As a hint, one is a stew recipe and the other is a sad song of a goddess over her destroyed city. Ready? Good job! Congratulations! From now on in our presentations, we will be using exclusively the cuneiform.